All right, welcome everybody to latest BuffZone video here, and I'm pleased to be joined by Tyler King of the Denver Gazette. And Tyler, you'll be coming into your third season covering the Buffaloes, and this is your first appearance on my channel, so I know you're extremely excited about that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this has been a great beat to be a part of. I've been really been enjoying it, and yeah, I'm happy to be on. It's no better time to talk football with spring ball coming around the corner next week.
Well, I know the Buff fans that only kind of see some of the YouTube stuff that I do. I mean, they've seen me interview Adam a lot, and with Neely and Jake Schwanitz a little bit, but you haven't been on. So kind of what's your background? Like, you've covered Penn State, you've covered CSU a little bit with the Gazette. What's kind of your background?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up a little bit north of Philadelphia.
Mhm.
I went to Penn State. I graduated during the pandemic in 2020, so not the greatest time for a sports writer, but I moved out here that year. I think it was September of 2020. Got started with the Gazette, doing a little page design first with some of my background from college, and then I slowly worked my way into more of a writing role, which has always been my goal. And yeah, I do a little bit of everything now for the Gazette. It's been almost 2 years now that I've been writing full time. Obviously, the Buffs football is the biggest thing I cover, but I'm a huge basketball guy. I'm going to be going to the NCAA tournament next week to
Mhm.
cover either CU or CSU. Kind of depends on where those two teams end up. I've covered the CU women a bunch too. Yeah, I cover CSU football a little bit, not as much, since Coach Prime was hired, but that's
Yeah.
that's kind of obvious. I help out a little bit with Nuggets too. I covered the NBA Finals run last year, helping out our main beat writer. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I was at high school hoops last week, so but college athletics is kind of what I enjoy a lot, the most. Obviously, coming from Penn State, that was a great introduction to the atmospheres of college football at Beaver Stadium, and I've really enjoyed the last 2 years being at Folsom Field full time and traveling around the last year, the Pac-12 last year, and looking
Mhm.
forward to seeing some of these new Big 12 stadiums this year too, which will be fun for me.
Yeah, so basically, what you do is essentially what all of us sports writers have done is cover a little of everything. I was a prep sports editor for a long time. I covered the World Series and Stanley Cup finals and U.S. Open, all that stuff. So I've covered a little bit of everything as well. So we all kind of pay our dues, or I don't even know if paying our dues, but like we all bounce around to various places. But clearly, my main focus is CU. Yours has kind of been CU, especially in the fall, the last couple of years. And so you've been around this football team a lot, and so that's why I wanted to have you on, because with spring ball coming up, kind of doing some different videos, and I wanted to chat with you about some breakout candidates. And I wrote an article a couple weeks ago with some of mine, and we'll discuss some of those, but also get some of your thoughts as well. And so these are guys, just to set it up the viewers here, is these are guys that didn't really make an impact last year, but we think could make an impact this year on the 2024 Buffs. So let's just kind of start. Give me one guy, right? The first guy at the top of your head that you think could be a good breakout candidate for this team.
I think the obvious one is Cormani McLean, just because of the time he did see last season. Obviously, it was early in the season. Coach Prime was talking about he needs to do more. He needs to do more to get on the field. Early in Pac-12 play, you started to see. I think it was the USC game. He started to see some more time in the field, and then as the season went on, he was kind of rotating in and out with some of the other guys opposite Travis Hunter when he was fully back. And it just feels like there's like that spot needs to be the opposite. The starting cornerback spot opposite Travis Hunter needs to be his this season if he's going to live up to the 5-star billing that he had. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
still one of the I don't know. I'm sure if Jordan Seaton is higher than him at this point, but one of the highest high school recruits that CU's ever signed. And there's a lot of pedigree that comes with that. Corners typically have been able to play pretty early in their career. Obviously, I mean, Travis Hunter is kind of a unicorn in many regards, but I just think CU is going to need to have a solid secondary starting corner alongside Hunter, and I think Cormani McLean is a great candidate for that. There's some transfers that they brought in that'll have to beat out, and it will be competing with, but he's definitely got all the talent in the world. He showed some of those those natural instincts at times last season where he was really impressive, but. This defense obviously has to get a lot better going into the season, and he's going to have to be a key part of that. I feel like.
Yeah, I think sometimes people see the 5-star and maybe forget that freshmen have a hard time a lot of
Yeah.
times, and even 5-stars do. And you don't see a lot of true freshmen that come in and play very well at the college level. Especially at a position like corner. because you're going up against senior receivers and older receivers, guys that are 22, 23 years old, you're trying to cover, and he's never seen anything like that. And so I still think the ceiling is super high for Cormani McClain. So I agree with you. I think he's a top breakout candidate for this team as well. I'm gonna start off, just look at my list here. I'm gonna go Tyler Brown, a guy that um, his story is well documented, right? He came from Jackson State last year and had his NCAA waiver denied and was not able to play. And it was unfortunate. I don't think he should have been denied, but he didn't get a chance to play. I don't know where he fits. I'm sure I've seen some people not even project him as a starter. I don't know where he's going to fit, but I know that he was an FCS All-American at Jackson State. He's a guy that has paid his dues to get to this point. They bring in all these transfer linemen, but don't forget about Tyler Brown, because that's a guy that I think would have helped this team last year if he was able to play. We'll see if he can help this team this year.
Yeah, I feel like he definitely would have been one of the starting guards last season, and
Mhm.
it was a shame that he wasn't allowed to play. Just kind of him and some other guys across the country that were denied waivers. That was well documented by us and people around the country. It was just a shame, and he would have helped this team. And I think it's going to be interesting with the guys that they brought in. Tyler Johnson, Justin Mayers. Those guys are really experienced college guards that have multiple years of experience. We'll see if Tyler Brown can beat one of those guys out. But I mean, this seems like there's a chance he could get some reps at center. They're trying to see what he could do there. You're competing with Yakiri Walker, the UConn transfer. I thought Hank Zelinskis was pretty good last year as a true freshman at that spot. And center is another very difficult position to play as a true freshman. But Zelinskis, a Cherry Creek local kid, played pretty well in the limited reps he got. So that'll be a nice, interesting battle there at center. And Tyler Brown should definitely factor into that because I mean he's a great kid. We've kind of every time we bump into him on campus, he's always got a smile on his face. He's brought a lot of personality to the team. Obviously, Coach Prime is a big fan of his, just off the field as well. So it would be nice to see him contribute to this team because, like you said, he's paid his dues. He earns that. But it's obviously going to come down to if he beats some guys out because it's going to be pretty heavy competitions all across the line this offseason, it feels like.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys I met because I went down and covered the Celebration Bowl down in Atlanta, Jackson State, or Deion's last game with Jackson State, and I had a chance to sit down and talk with him. Great young man, so I'm rooting for him big time, and hopefully he can do well. Give me another one. Who's the breakout candidate?
I'm gonna do the offensive side of the ball this time, and I'm going with Omari and Miller just because I think he. I mean, it's another crowded wide receiver room this time around, and just that second half against USC, it was just that was really all of his production for the entire season. Was in that 30 minutes of football, and he was just electric. He racked up almost 200 yards of on through the air in that second half alone. It just kind of took over that game, and it was weird that he didn't really see the field before then and kind of didn't do much after that. But obviously, another true freshman, and people talked about him a little bit in fall camp about being a potential breakout star last season, and maybe with another full offseason under his belt, I don't think he was an early enrollee last year. So a full offseason in Boulder, maybe that'll give him some more time to work with Shador, get that chemistry down because it feels like they're going to need a bunch of different guys to contribute at wide receiver. Obviously, you got Travis Hunter coming back, Jimmy Horn is coming back. They've got some really intriguing other transfers like Will Shepard from the
Yep.
SEC. LeJontay Wester put up big numbers at FIU, but I feel like Omari and Miller should be a factor at wide receiver this year, just given the talent that he showed last year running various different kinds of routes. It's not like he's just a speed kind of go ball guy. He's able to find a way to get open over the middle of the field. And I just think he's a talent that's got to be utilized this year because they're going to want to throw the ball a lot again with Shador quarterback. And, they've got plenty of options to do it. I don't see why Miller can't be a key guy for them.
Yeah, I do think they might throw the ball a little bit this year. And Miller is a guy that clearly he teased us all with that USC game, and we wanted to see more after that. Didn't see a whole lot, but he's certainly, again, he was in that true freshman group that it's tough to really be great, throughout your freshman year. We saw it with Dylan Edwards too, right? Phenomenal first game, and then didn't even score his next touchdown until the very last game of the season. So, yeah, he's one of those guys for sure. I'm going to go back over to defense, and I'm going to do a combo here. I'm going to do two guys because they're the same position, and I think there's probably only room for one of them to be a breakout candidate because, and we're at linebacker here, but Levanta Bentley is going to be your starter at linebacker, I think. But I'm going to go Brendan Gant and Demoy Kennedy. I think one of those two needs to be a breakout candidate. I don't know if you need both. It'd be great if you get both, but both of them are guys. Brendan came from Florida State, Demoy from Alabama. The coaches talked a lot about those guys last year, and going into the year and saying their speed and just kind of the experience of Brendan Gant, the speed of Demoy Kennedy, and we never really saw it. I mean, linebacker we know was a position that they got to a point where, you know what, we need Trevor Woods down there because these guys aren't stepping up here. Neither one of them was ever fully healthy, I don't think. I know Brendan Gant was not. But I think one of those two guys needs to step up and be a breakout candidate because they need somebody else. I think Levante Bentley needs to take another step forward, but I think they need that other linebacker that at least matches what Levante Bentley did last year.
Yeah, and it's kind of telling. They must believe in some of these guys a little bit because it wasn't a big position that they added in the transfer portal over the offseason when we kind of all expected they would try to go get a starter or two to play heavy, to play a lot of snaps because they just were lacking. That position was not very productive all of last season. Getting Levante Bentley back is good. I thought he got a lot better throughout the season went on, but I think you're spot on with both those guys. I mean, Demoy Kennedy obviously has all the tools. He's been the guy that we've talked about with linebackers coach Andre Hart a lot about just asking him about what he needs to do to get on the field, how he can be utilized, things like that. And they seem to like his potential. It's just kind of all about tapping into that, this offseason. And whether him or Brendan Gant can emerge, I think that is going to be really key going forward. And I think something that could be decided during spring ball going into fall camp. I think they would like to have a good idea of what one or both those guys could do in case they need to maybe add in the post-spring transfer portal period because, linebacker has to be much better than it was last season.
Yeah, I think this is a big spring for those linebackers. Not only those two, but Keaton Wade coming from Kentucky as a transfer, and then some of those younger guys. I think it's a huge spring for those guys. To your point, to see if they actually need to tap in to the transfer portal and get more linebackers, or if they feel comfortable with it. So let's do one more kind of breakout candidate, and then maybe one sleeper candidate that we each got. So give me one more.
I'll stick on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to go with Alton McAllister just because of. I mean, he was one of the best transfers that they got, last offseason. Everybody kind of saw what he did as a true freshman at Houston, just one of the best running backs in the country. Obviously missed all of the 2022 season with a knee injury. Just never was right in 2023 either. I mean, for guys, it's different recovering from, a significant knee injury like that. Some guys are able to come back in 10, 11, 12 months. But some guys, it takes longer. I mean, you look at a different sport, obviously, but Jamal Murray, it took him quite a long time for the Nuggets to get back after his ACL injury. And it's just Alton McAllister was the guy that is just a 3-down running back that you really can count on when he's at his best. And that's just something they really didn't have at all last season. Obviously, Dylan Edwards was incredibly effective in the TCU game where you're playing a more spread out defense and you're able to use a speedy back out of the backfield to catch passes. But Alton can kind of do a little bit of that, all of that. And he's a great player to use on first down. Runs hard, can fight for yards. And if he's fully healthy going into the season, which I mean, there's no reason to believe at this point that he won't be. I think that'll be a massive boost to the offense, just being able to use a guy like McCaskill on first and second down. So you're not constantly playing in 3rd and 7, those 3rd and long situations where they just struggled in the back half of last season. So McCaskill is definitely going to be intriguing to see what his burst is going to be like throughout the spring. But you just want to get that guy fully 100% healthy going into fall camp because you give him a few weeks to ramp up for the season. And I think you got a special running back on your hands. Could be one of the better ones in the Big 12 if he's at his best.
Yeah, he's actually my favorite breakout candidate. I was kind of saving him towards the end, but I'm glad you mentioned him. But we know the Buffs, they need to run the ball better than they did last year, and that's going to make Shador better. I think that makes everybody better. The offensive line is such a key to that. But I think Alton McCaskill, of all the running backs, I think there's talent there, but he's the guy I think that needs to step up and be that guy. And I think he makes Dylan Edwards more effective. He's going to make Savion Wilkerson more of a factor, I think, when you come into short yardage, things like that. And so, he's one of my favorites. My final one before we do a little sleeper is Arden Walker on the edge, and he's a guy that I don't know who asked it, but towards the end of the year last year, we had Jordan Dominic, and somebody asked him, who's kind of the guy that you see taking the the flag from you. And he mentioned Arden Walker, another Cherry Creek guy, a guy that went to Missouri and then came here last year, made a couple of plays. I think he had a fumble recovery against Nebraska. I think he had a sack, but he's a guy that is still coming into his own. And I remember talking to him last year, and he said, "Look, this position is hard. You don't come in as a freshman and start dominating. You have to learn over time this position." I think that he's kind of poised to be that guy, to step into a Jordan Dominic role. If he's anywhere near as effective as Jordan Dominic, that's a big time breakout, for Arden Walker. So he's a guy I look at.
Yeah, I think he's got all the talent in the world. Obviously, he's a great kid. We talked to him. I think it was toward the end of the last season in one of the
Mhm.
midweek availabilities. It's just been a great story to kind of see. I mean, there aren't a ton of Colorado kids on this roster, so to have him around is nice for the fan base, nice for the local people. Obviously, like you mentioned, Cherry Creek, former standout. So he knows what it's like to win football games. That's for sure. And yeah, without Jordan Dominic, he was really the only guy that was super productive on the edge for them last season. They brought in a guy like BJ Green from Arizona State, who's going to be likely an instant contributor, but they're going to need to get production from the guys that were here last season. Kyrie Mans, I think, is another one too that could surprise some people. But between him and Walker, I think you're looking to get one of those guys to be a consistent starter on the edge, probably opposite BJ Green. But they really need to do better at getting after the quarterback. I feel like this season they get a lot. They feel like they were getting a lot of pressure last season, just not converting on some of the sacks and finishing some of those plays, which I think is going to be key for this defense in 2024.
Yeah, I agree with you. And sorry, I have a little bit of a cold I'm getting over. But so as we wrap up here, you have a sleeper candidate, like somebody that maybe is a little lower on the roster. We don't talk about a whole lot, but someone that you think could rise up and make his name known this year.
Yeah, I've got one. I think Jaden Milner-Jones is a really,
Hmm.
really fascinating player as a safety, kind of a nickel slot coverage guy. Played a lot more than people realized last season with some of the injuries that they had, and I was really impressed. They're true freshmen. A lot of these guys that we're talking about were true freshmen last year, and like you mentioned, they're all going to have their bumps and kind of ups and downs throughout that first season in college football. But I was consistently impressed with Jaden Milner-Jones's positioning on the field. Like, it felt like he was always kind of in the right place to make some big tackles. He was never getting really burned in coverage. It felt like just a consistent player. Obviously the secondary has gotten a big boost the offseason. Preston Hodge from Liberty feels like a guy who could be a starter in the slot. They're bringing back plenty of guys at that position. Miles Slusher was a starter going into last season, but was hurt a lot, and he felt like he would have played a significant role if he was healthier, maybe. But I think Jaden Milner-Jones just has a unique skill set, as a longer kind of rangy guy, who's quick enough to play in the slot. He showed at times last season. So, there's a lot of veteran guys that might be ahead of him on the depth chart right now going into spring ball, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of spring ball, maybe going into fall camp, that he's a guy that's really worked his way into maybe not a starting role, but a regular rotation role in that secondary, because that secondary was probably the most talented group on the defense last season, should be going in again this season. And I think Milner-Jones is just kind of a piece of that, because like I said, I just really liked watching him play last season. I think he's got something special with him.
Yeah, that secondary group is so interesting because there's a lot of guys that I think I don't pencil them in as starters, but I look at them and say, man, but how can you keep this guy off the field?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Jaden is one of those guys. And we saw him get on the field a little bit more towards the end of last year. And part of it was some injuries. Trevor Woods wasn't playing at the end, and there was some guys banged up, but he was on when he was on the field. It was like, oh, he's effective. Like, this is a good player. And we've seen some veterans and even coaches mention him in some videos we've seen in the offseason. And so he's a guy that when you look at the future, you look pretty good. But I don't know how you keep him off the field in
yeah.
2024, and whether that's 10 snaps or 20 snaps. I agree. I don't see him as a starter, but he's got to be on the field somehow. And so I like that one. I'm going to go maybe even more obscure than that is Seth Smalls, a guy that's played 4 years of college football now, hasn't done a whole lot, but we've learned this offseason is no longer playing defense. I mean, he was a 5-star edge player coming out of high school, went to Washington, still doesn't have a college sack. as a 5-star edge. And but we've learned that he's now going to be a tight end for the Buffs. And so as a tight end, I see him as a potential breakout candidate because this is a position that they need. They went out and got Shimon Mateer, but that's it. But we've seen them transition a couple defensive guys to tight end. Savell is 6'3", 260, somewhere around there. This is a guy that I don't know if he's going to catch 20 passes or any, but this is a guy that I think can make an impact as a blocker, as a legit tight end. He played a little bit in high school. And so, he's a guy that one of the guys I'm intrigued with going into the spring is like, okay, how does Seth Smalls fit into this offense?
Yeah, and I think that position was something they just lacked all season, was like a real true blocking tight end. Obviously, Mikey Harrison was a great pass catcher, throughout the season, and obviously he moved on. He followed Sean Lewis to San Diego State, and like you mentioned, they got Mateer from Cincinnati. He was a good player, should be a weapon in the offense. But we saw even early in the season they were pretty convinced they didn't have a blocking tight end by using some of the defensive linemen, on in some of those short yardage goal line rushing situations, whether it was, guys like Shane Cokes. I mean, we saw all those guys on the offensive line at times. And, if Savell can be that guy, you mentioned, he's obviously a very huge man. He's very impressive. I think I rode in the elevator with him once after a weekly press conference. He's a very, impressive. He got impressive stature. And like I said, the production just hasn't been there despite being a 5-star guy. Everyone was kind of excited to see what he could do when he got to CU, just kind of a fresh start. But, it just didn't seem like it clicked for him last year. I know he was injured a little bit at times. But yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to see if he can be that blocking tight end for this guy. And, guys that change positions, looking to do whatever they can for the team. It's nice to see a 5-star like that kind of be open to something like that. And because some guys wouldn't be, they just feel like, I was a great high school player. I was a 5-star. Why should I be the one to change positions? But he's obviously bought into that. And if he can play a role in any part for this offense and helping the run game get a little better, being an extra pass protection guy for Shedeur, I mean, anything he can produce on the offensive end as a blocking tight end, I think would be key. And it would be fun to see him catch a touchdown too. That would be if they get into goal line situations and he gets left alone and wide open. I think that would be cool to see too.
Yeah, this is before your time, but Nick Kasa at CU several years ago was a 5-star, maybe he was a 4-star, I can't remember. Coming out of high school, was actually recruited by Florida, a whole bunch of places, came to CU as that edge guy, never really panned out there. And then his final year, his grandpa always used to tell him, I think he'd be a better tight end. And he wanted to play defense. His last year, he switched to tight end and was really good. I mean, some of the numbers Mikey Harrison put up last year were the best since Nick Kasa, back in I think 2013 or 14, and he wound up getting drafted by the Raiders the next year as a tight end. So I don't know if Savell's that, but the point is that sometimes after some years of you're slugging along in a position that's not working out, that fresh start can be a real motivator and something that energizes you a little bit. And so let's hope we can see that out of Seth Smalls, because I think there's clearly ability there, right? And you have that defensive mentality, which could help you as a blocker. So certainly lots of breakout candidates. There's probably even more we could go to make this twice as long, but there's a lot of guys that need to step up for this team. But that's a great thing about college football is every year there's breakout candidates because you cycle guys through because of graduation, and now even more so with transfer portal, things like that. So there's a ton of breakout candidates, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And Tyler, we'll be out covering spring ball, we think, starting on Monday. We'll see how the weather goes, but starting on Monday. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm really pumped. I mean, it's a busy time of year, obviously, with Selection Sunday is a couple days away. We're going to be, I know I'll be in Boulder on Sunday for, if for the men, if they're likely to get in at this point, it seems like, the women seem like they have a good chance to host the opening weekend in Boulder, which would be really fun as well. I know I'll be traveling for the NCAA tournament, like I said earlier, regardless, whether it's CU or CSU, kind of, however that shakes out. But spring football is right around the corner as well. And, it's been kind of felt like a long off season, that Utah game to close out the season kind of feels like a distant memory at this point. But, I'm excited to get back out there, hopefully get out to see some practices, maybe the indoor facility, and just see what some of these new guys look like, because it's going to be the thing for however long Deion Sanders is the coach of Colorado. It's going to be a cycle in the offseason, and that's just part of college football these days. But it makes spring football even more exciting than it used to be, I feel like, with the amount of newcomers you're going to see, not just for the Buffs, but across the country on all these teams every year going forward.
Yeah, and next week's gonna be super busy. I mean, we were gonna do this in person
Yeah.
at Pro Day on Thursday, but they're expecting massive snowstorm, and so Pro Day's next Tuesday. So we've got Selection Sunday on Sunday. You'll be
Mhm.
covering the men. I'll be at the women's selection party. Monday is the first day of spring football. Tuesday's Pro Day. Wednesday is another practice for football, and we'll see who we get press conference wise, and then probably you're on the road by Thursday going
Yeah.
somewhere. I'm hoping to stay in Boulder to cover the women's NCAA tournament over the weekend. So it's a busy week next week.
Yeah,
We'll
definitely for
get through
sure.
it.
Yeah. Just hoping the
Well,
men aren't in Dayton. That would make my life even more hectic if they're in their first four playing on Tuesday or Wednesday. That would be pretty crazy.
yeah, let's hope they're not that. Let's hope they can go somewhere somewhat close and
Yeah.
avoid that first four. But Tyler, I appreciate it very much, and we'll try to do this again sometime during spring ball, and maybe chat about what we're seeing at practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yep.